is Philip Holtquist. I'm an assistant professor of political science here at Roosevelt, and I direct the International Studies program. I want to start with thanking a few people that make this happen. First, our thanks to CAN TV, Chicago Access Network, for covering this event live. If you know someone that couldn't make it today, please let them know that they can watch right now on cable channel 22 or watch online at cantv.org, cantv.org. I also want to thank Professor Emeritus of Economics, Steve Balkin. He organized this event and put in all of the effort to make this happen in a very short amount of time, and so we owe him a great of gratitude. He's also one that roped me into doing this job, so give an extra thank you for that, I guess. I also want to thank Julie Rowan, Maya Roberts, and Laura Janada for logistical support, and the rest of the team here at Roosevelt. And then in general, thank you to Roosevelt University for providing this forum that we can advance this sort of global social justice mission of the university. So we're here today, as you know from the flyers, to discuss the humanitarian crisis in Burma for the Rohingya people, or the Rohingya people. You heard different pronunciations. This is one of the worst humanitarian crises that exist right now on the planet, and this is a time where there are several, and so this is a particularly troubling event. There's a long history of human rights abuses against the Rohingya people in Burma or Myanmar, so much so that the United Nations has called the Rohingya the most persecuted minority group on the planet. The Holocaust Museum's Early Warning Project for Genocide has included the Rohingya people in Burma as a top risk of genocide over the last several years. The most recent spate of violence erupted in August of this year following an attack by a small armed group against police posts in the Rakhine state, Burma. The Burmese government response to this has been brutal, to say the least. I'm going to let the panelists give you more of a flavor for this, but some idea, there's at least an estimate of 500,000 refugees into neighboring states, mostly in Bangladesh, which is already one of the most densely populated countries on the planet and does not have the resources to handle this type of crisis. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called this crisis a textbook example of ethnic cleansing amounting to crimes against humanity, which is a category for international action and intervention. So our panel here today is in the spirit of thinking globally and acting locally. We're organized to try to understand the causes of the Rohingya crisis in Burma and Myanmar, and to learn what we can do to help protect the Rohingya people, and also to learn what we can do to support the Rohingya refugees that are here in Chicago that have been here over for the last 4 years or so. We have a very distinguished panel today, so I'm going to give you their introductions, and then we'll have an opening statement in just a moment. So first we have Azim Ibrahim. Dr. Azim Ibrahim is a senior fellow at the Center for Global Policy and Research, for Global Policy, and a research professor at the Strategic Studies Institute at the U.S. Army War College. He received his PhD from the University of Cambridge and has previously been appointed an International Security Fellow at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and a World Fellow at Yale University. Over the years, Dr. Ibrahim has met and advised numerous world leaders on policy development on several fronts, including working in formal advising positions in the UK and in Pakistan. Outside academia, Dr. Ibrahim has been a reservist for the 4th Battalion Parachute Regiment and is a multi-award-winning entrepreneur. He ranked as a top 100 global thinker by the European Social Think Tank in 2010 and is named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. Currently, his most recent book is The Rohingyas that you can see here, The Rohingyas Inside Myanmar's Hidden Genocide. This is Dr. Ibrahim here in the first. I'm going to actually go through everybody. Second, we have Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. He's the director of the Burma Task Force. Imam Mujahid is a producer, author, and nonprofit entrepreneur. He's the president of Sound Vision, a Chicago-based media organization, and he is the chair emeritus of the Parliament of World's Religions. Imam Mujahideen is selected 6 times as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world from 2011 to 2016. And currently, as I mentioned, he chairs the Burma Task Force USA, a human rights organization formed to stop the genocide of Rohingyas in Burma. Next, we have Nasir Zakaria of the Rohingya Cultural Center in Chicago. At the age of 14, Nasir Zakaria was forced to flee Burma. He never saw his family again. He had to cross the borders of Burma, Thailand, and finally Malaysia, where he lived as an illegal alien for 23 years. In 2012, he and his wife, daughter, and adopted grandfather were finally granted refugee status and arrived in Chicago. Nasir became a dishwasher at the Rivers Casino, and that is where he learned to speak English. He was always aware of how difficult life was for his fellow Rohingya refugees and decided that he needed to create a place for the Rohingya to call their own. In 2016, with the generous support of the Zakat Foundation, he is finally able to open the Rohingya Cultural Center. He no longer washes dishes. Instead, he has devoted his life to helping his fellow refugees in Chicago and those left behind in Burma and the refugee camps. So these are our 3 distinguished panelists. Please give them a warm welcome. As far as the outline of this is going to go, each of the panelists are going to have some time, 10 to 15 minutes, to give their opening statement, followed by a round of questions by me, and then we'll open it up for audience participation. But first, Stephen Balkin has asked Jack Lawler of the Lakeside Buddha, a Chicago Buddhist organization, to give an opening statement. The fact that this has happened in Burma, a majority Buddhist country, has opened up lots of questions about the role of Buddhism, and so it's important to have a statement from Jack Lawler here. Let me read his introduction. Jack Lawler has been practicing mediation in organized Buddhist communities known as Sanghas since 1975. In 1992, he was ordained a Dharma teacher by the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh at a transmission of the lamp ceremony in the Plum Village Monastery in southern France. Jack has served as the president of the Buddhist Council of the Midwest, on the National Board of Directors for the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, in the core group of the Chicago chapter of Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and is presently serving as the president of the Association of North American Dharma Teachers in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition. Jack is the co-founder of Lakeside Buddha Sangha in Evanston, now in its 27th year, and he has led hundreds of retreats in the Midwest, the Rocky Mountains, and at Thich Nhat Hanh's root temple in Hue, Vietnam. Please welcome Jack Lawler.
Thank you, Philip, and distinguished panelists. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm grateful for all of you being here in peace and respect for one another, trying to endeavor to find ways to help the Rohingya people. The task facing us is both challenging and immense. How can we stop the illegitimate use of military force so many thousands of miles away, causing such immense suffering and injury to so many people? How can we engage political complexities in Myanmar, the United Nations, and the United States to stop the violence and jumpstart the provision of aid to refugees? How can we work together to bring and allow the Rohingya people to return to their homes, rebuild a safe and healthy place to live and dwell in peace? Please know this. This is from the bottom of my heart. Buddhists throughout the world have been trying to prevent this tragedy in the ways known and available to them for at least 6 years. In 2012, Buddhist teachers, the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh, spoke out against the oppression of the Rohingya by forces within Myanmar. In 2013, on behalf of the Association of North American Dharma Teachers in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, I wrote to senior monastics Ashin Warathu and Ashin Wamala of the monastic Buddhist Sangha in Myanmar, asking them to stop instigating distrust and hatred toward the Rohingya people in a letter delivered by the U.S. State Department. In February of this year, I wrote another such letter to the President of Myanmar and to State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi in my capacity as President of the North American Dharma Teachers and Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition. Sister Chang Kong, who is Thich Nhat Hanh's first assistant and most senior nun in our order, collaborated with me and other senior monastics to write a similar letter in February of this year, in which Sister Chang Kong offered to travel personally from Thailand to Myanmar to provide counseling to Aung San Suu Kyi and to help negotiate for peace. That letter was never answered. Since early this year, the Dalai Lama, the Buddhist Churches of America, and Buddhist publications such as Lion's Roar, and hundreds of Dharma teachers in North America, through open letters to the public and to the government of Myanmar, have all spoken out against the government's behavior and treatment of Rohingya. As you can see, Buddhists from throughout the world want to learn from you and work with you to transform this tragic suffering. None of what has happened is consistent with the Buddha's teachings. And I would like to complete these opening remarks by sharing a short reading from the Buddha's Discourse on Love, with the hope that those here can work together in a spirit of understanding, respect, compassion, and love. These are the words of the Buddha. He or she who wants to attain peace should practice being upright, humble, and capable of using loving speech. He or she will know how to live simply and happily, with senses calmed, without being covetous and carried away by the emotions of the majority. Let him or her not do anything that will be disapproved by the wise ones. And this is what he or she contemplates. May everyone be happy, and may their hearts be filled with joy. May all living beings live in security and peace. May all beings who are frail or strong, tall or short, big or small, visible or not visible, near or far away, already born or yet to be born, may all of them dwell in perfect tranquility. Let no one do harm to anyone. Let no one put the life of anyone in danger. Let no one, out of anger or ill will, wish anyone any harm. Just as a mother loves and protects her only child at the risk of her own life, we should cultivate boundless love to offer to all living beings in the entire cosmos. We should let our boundless love pervade the whole universe, above, below, and across. Our love will know no obstacles. Our heart will be absolutely free from hatred and enmity. Whether standing or walking, sitting or lying, as long as we are awake, we should maintain this mindfulness of love in our own heart. This is noble, the noblest way of living. Thank you very much, and I look forward to learning from you this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Let's start. We'll just go in order here. Let's start with Dr. Ibrahim. We have your PowerPoint prepared, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Philip, and thanks so much to Roosevelt University for hosting this, and thanks, Jack, so much for those warm and critical words during this very difficult and confusing time. I'm not going to talk about what's going on in Myanmar right now. You only have to put your TVs on to understand and see that. But what I'll do is I'll very briefly give you an indication of how we got here and what were the main drivers that got us to where we are today. So let me start off with a historical quote. Naturally, the common people don't want war, but it's the leaders of that country that determine policy. And it's a very simple thing to take the people along. You just tell them that they are being attacked, and it works the same in every country and in every time. A sophisticated audience like this, you will know that this quote is from Field Marshal Hermann Göring, Hitler's Vice-Chancellor. Now, when we look at these words today, they may seem like the echoes of a bygone era, an era that was marked by persecution and genocide. But how would we react to these kind of words today? Let me tell you about a small country, a mid-sized European country, was these tensions between the majority Christian population and a minority that lives within its borders. And just like the Jews of the 1930s, this minority is different. They have different features, they have different skin colour, they have a different language, and they have a different religion. First, the reports start off with discrimination, boycotts of the businesses, bus stations refusing to sell them tickets. But as time goes on, it gets more and more sinister. This minority is already undereducated, and so they're barred from schools, and then they're barred from standing for election, and then barred from voting altogether. And there's some in public life that start to say that this minority, they were never part of our society. In this country, only Christians can be loyal citizens of this country, and this minority is not amongst them. And this narrative starts to harden into conventional wisdom, until even the diplomats start to say that this minority is actually inferior. Then the regional government starts to detain this minority into permanent internment camps and doesn't allow them to work. And the religious clergy start to incite violence against them. And that is when the pogroms start, and that eventually lead to massacres. Now imagine this country was ruled by an autocratic military dictatorship, and there's hope of political change. Soon, a great democratic leader will be released from prison, and there's cheers from all over the world. At last, the Democrats have won. At last, there's going to be change. Everything's going to get better. And then there's nothing. The discrimination and the violence continues. Any hope that democracy would bring change is now gone. Now, if this was Europe, we would shake our heads, we would lobby our representatives, there would be speeches in Parliament, there would be speeches in Congress, journalists would ask tough questions. But this is happening today. It's not happening in Europe, it's happening in Myanmar, and it's happening to the Rohingya. So how did we get here? To understand the current discrimination, we have to take a step back in history. Myanmar is a country of about 51 million people that's sandwiched between Laos, Cambodia, China and Thailand. Trading links with India brought Islam to the region. Buddhism arrived about 800 AD, and much of its history is multi-confessional, with Hindu, Buddhists, Muslims, Christians all living side by side. Today it's about 80% Buddhists, 8% Christian, and 4% Muslim and other minorities. The Rohingya make up the largest ethnic minority, about 1.2 to 2 million in the Rakhine district. Now, the main accusation that is made against the Rohingya, the fundamental crux of all the problems is this here. That the Rohingya, they're a non-entity, they're a non-people. This term Rohingya is a manufactured term. This is the accusation that's made against them, that this term is manufactured. And some extremists actually put a date on it. They say this term was made up in 1942 in March, and before that, this term did not exist. These people are all illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. They came over in 1942, and they made up this term Rohingya to give themselves an identity, and this is all false, and they should all go back to the country. So this is the kind of stuff that you see in the newspapers in Myanmar. So one of the things I did in my book is I tried to examine the veracity of this claim. So I went and dug up some documents, some of them dating back to 1799, and 1811 and 1824. I went to the Indian National Archives in New Delhi and dug up documents from 1824 and 1826 when the British ruled Burma. The British were experts at administration, and there was a census done, and you can see here in some of the documents the term Rohingya dating to 1811 clearly used. But this is the key document here, 1826, by a British civil servant, Charles Patton, who did an extensive survey of the region, an extensive census, and this is the original document in which he articulated very clearly that 1 in 3 souls in the Rakhine district, the Arakan district, is of Rohingya origin. So this claim, it's patently false that this term was made up in 1942, that these people had no history in this region. It does not stand up to historical scrutiny. So where is this animosity actually coming from? So for that, we need to step back into World War II, when the Japanese invaded what was at that time British Burma. The majority Buddhist population decided to side with the Japanese invaders, believing that the Japanese are going to be victorious and this will lead to swifter independence, whereas the minority Rohingya population stayed loyal to the British colonial masters. So when the country did become independent in 1948, there was bad blood between the two people. But despite that, there was still relative calm, there was democracy and peace up until 1962, when there was a military coup by General Ne Win. General Ne Win, he tried to implement what he called the Burmese road to socialism. This was a communist manifesto, which was a complete economic disaster. It completely destroyed the country. So he did what a lot of military dictators do in that situation, is that they tried to find a scapegoat. They tried to find somebody on whom to blame all the ills of society on, rather than take responsibility themselves. And the Rohingya minority, who were already looked at with suspicion, were the minority of choice for being selected for this suspicion. And he also started to become much more overtly Buddhist. He started funding monasteries, he started passing laws and regulations, and then he started reinforcing the narrative that only Buddhists can be loyal citizens and everybody else is disloyal to this country. Then he passed this law in 1982, the Citizenship Act, in which stripped all the Rohingya of their nationality and citizenship. So this is now the basis of the problem of the Rohingya, is that they're amongst the largest stateless people in the world. In fact, a recent Harvard study indicated that 1 in 7 stateless people, and this is before the current crisis, around the world are of Rohingya origin. But General Ne Win was overthrown in 1988 in a popular revolt, but even though he left, his regime stayed fully intact. And then we had the elections in 1990. There was elections which Aung San Suu Kyi won and the generals ignored. And then this led to violence. There was violence because a Rakhine woman was raped and killed, and the Rohingya were blamed, and this led to huge massacres and violence, which resulted in 250,000 Rohingya fleeing to Bangladesh in one of the most sustained periods of violence. But despite that, there was other elections in 2015 which brought Aung San Suu Kyi to power, which brings us to the current situation. Now, one of the questions get asked very often is about the Buddhist extremists. This is Ashin Warathu. He's the head of one of the militant groups of the Buddhists, and he's quite a strange kind of character. And one of the questions one gets asked most often is that Buddhists are peace-loving people. How could they engage in such hatred? Now, his speeches are available on YouTube. You can actually see them, and they're just laced with pure hatred. And one of the things he tries to propagate is that the Rohingya, they're not just only illegal immigrants, but they're actually reincarnated from snakes and insects. So when you're killing them, you're not actually killing humans, you're actually killing vermin. So this is the kind of language that he's perpetuating. And there's this individual. When I went to Myanmar myself, I visited there for some time. I visited the camps. I tried to find out who are the people instigating the violence against the Rohingya, and this individual's name came constantly, Dr. A. Mong, the leader of the Arakan National Party. And after this period of violence, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya were confined to these massive concentration camps within Myanmar and outside Myanmar as well. The only way they had to escape was on these rickety boats in extremely dangerous circumstances, when many of them were sold into slavery in the Thai fishing trade and elsewhere. So this brings us up to 2016. When Aung San Suu Kyi came to power, she set up a number of commissions. One of them was to look at the civil war in Myanmar, and there was another commission which she set up. She asked Kofi Annan to investigate the problems in the Rakhine district and then to come up with a wide variety of solutions. I had the good fortune of briefing Kofi Annan in last year in November, and I was very, very hopeful that some good will come out of his commission. But the cynics argued that these commissions were only set up to pacify international public opinion, because after Aung San Suu Kyi set them up, literally about a week later, she visited the United States. She gave a speech at the General Assembly, and she visited President Obama in the White House, and President Obama lifted all unilateral sanctions against Myanmar. So some would argue that she set those commissions up just to demonstrate that she's trying to do whatever she can. These are complex problems, but she's trying to get to the bottom of it, and she's trying to find a solution. But interestingly, whilst Aung San Suu Kyi was in the United States, President Obama was not the only leader she met. She also met leaders from the United States Congress who were much less impressed by her attitude. For example, there was Senator Bob Corker, who said that after witnessing her complete disregard for the human suffering in Myanmar, he intends to pay very close attention to her behaviour. And we can maybe discuss this a little bit more in the question answer about Aung San Suu Kyi's attitude. But further to that, there was an attack shortly afterwards in 2016 by a little known militant group, the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which then led the Myanmar military to have a full lockdown of the Rakhine district, in which they evacuated almost all the Buddhist citizens and left the Rohingya. Human Rights Watch obtained satellite imagery of villages being burnt down in a systematic and organised fashion. So here's a picture, for example, of a village before. This is the village of Kietiopin, in which 245 buildings were burnt down. This is before, and this is after. This is the village of Wapiek before, and this is after. This had over 100,000 people displaced and left 200 dead in just those villages. And this is a photo of the village in the aftermath. When President Trump got elected, Ashin Warathu said that President Trump is just exactly like me. He wants to fight Muslim fundamentalists just like me. And in fact, Dr. A. Mong, the gentleman I referred to earlier, the leader of the Arakan National Party, even wrote a letter to President Trump saying that I welcome your presidency and I look forward to working with you in tackling the scourge of Islamic extremism. Now, Aung San Suu Kyi said that she doesn't understand why the Rohingya are fleeing, and she wants international investigators to come and join her and try to find out. And she is, in fact, the foreign minister of Myanmar. And after she said that, she actually denied access to the United Nations. She refused to give them visas, saying privately that this is not going to be helpful. So we can discuss this a lot more in the question answers. So I'll just leave you with that the Rohingya story is replete with the echoes of history. We were right to stand up to the Nazis. We should have stood up in Darfur. We should have stood up in Bosnia. And we should have stood up in Rwanda. And we should now work to ensure that we should not say in the future that we should have acted sooner. Thank you so much for listening.
My name is Malik Mujahid, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for organizing and coming here. I'm personally appreciative of American Buddhist community. They have been partners in stopping and preventing this genocide. And I'm glad to see the CAN TV. That's where I learned to produce as well. 284 villages, which is 60% of all Rohingya villages, have been destroyed. And there is still burning. It's not a genocide in the history. It's happening right now as we speak of. We have a log of daily attacks. And yesterday, there were 14 reports of village burnings, raids. And day before that, it shouldn't say September 2nd, it should say September 30th, 12 reports. So we have a daily log of this. If anyone of you are interested, we can provide you a link of that. It is wrong to say 500,000 have come to Bangladesh. At least physically, no one is attacking them. Among them are people of Buddhist faith, which are not only came with Rohingyas there, but they are being protected Not only that, but they are being provided their own diet. There's a special distribution center which is established for this purpose. So what is the statistics of this million people devastated? Half almost are devastated inside. 120,000 were already in concentration camp. Now they have built new concentration camps. There are another 100,000. 100,000 to 300,000, no one have accurate statistics, are wandering in jungle trying to get to Bangladesh, because what they have done is all the known path to Bangladesh are being blocked by the military directly, because that's where all the international photographers were. So videos are not coming out, and yes, if you Google Rohingya, you will have latest news. Otherwise, it's not headline on any television. A story has already disappeared, although it happened in the past. Let's get on to another story. It's happening right now. In Bangladesh, it's also wrong to say how many are there. People are normally saying 500,000. Yes, 500,000 came in last 30 days. That's more people coming into another country as refugees than what they came to Europe in last one whole year from Mediterranean. And 90,000 actually came from last December to this April. And 500,000 were already there. Now, no one has accurate numbers because Bangladesh does not quite count, they're registering about 600 people a day, but they do not consider them to be refugees. Only 30,000 are allowed to be refugees. So real impact is 1 million people devastated in a matter of 4 weeks. And I like you to remember the word Tola Tole. If you Google, you will find it. This is the mayor of Tola Tole, former mayor. Badiur Rahman is his name. And I was there just until last Friday. So I was meeting and talking with people. So I asked who were the leaders of this community. Our estimate is 1,700 people have been killed there. And we have a team there right now interviewing all the survivors we can find. We found 2 former mayors, and I interviewed one, and our crew interviewed the other one, and the current serving secretary of the elected village council. 3,000 people there were Rohingyas, and 300 Rakhine. But mayor is Rakhine, because remember, they are no longer allowed to vote. So majority, 3,000 people were being ruled by 300 people. And that mayor currently, and I have his phone number as well. I'm looking for some major media to actually interview. So he thinks there are 750 have been killed. And people have spoken to him, and those people have given that recorded testimony. But the former mayor and the other secretary and all that thing, it is 1,700 people. And it didn't happen just suddenly. And the whole nonsense of somebody attacking someone is a wrong story, which very conveniently, Jews were to be blamed for Holocaust if you listen to Hitler people. And here, of course, Rohingyas to be blamed for everything they do. Whether any proof, any independent media, of course, they're all blocked. So, so this, you can see a river on the top. River goes down and it comes back down here. So 3-side village is surrounded by a river. So mayor, for last several month attacks and individual rape on Rohingya women will be coming. He was doing meeting and he asked everybody, nobody should leave. If any man was not found in their homes, it means they are terrorists and whatnot. And he asked all people to assemble tomorrow morning. And he also gave the good news that your houses will be burned, but none of you will be killed. We should write a thank you note for him. Next morning, helicopters, military arrived, which we have evidence that he was in cahoots with. And those people who have assembled were ready target. As they're burning, they're killing them. And some of them ran to that corner over there where image of the former mayor is there. And that's where the real massacre. So we have photos of people, videos of photo gathered there. trying to figure out, because that river is, it's a hilly area, it's a pretty fast river, it's not easy to cross. So that's where they were massacred and little children were thrown in the river, about 1,700 of them. I'm hoping and praying and trying my best to get Tula Tuli have the impact which Srebrenica has in Bosnia. That's when the world started using the term genocide. It is a genocide, except people keep calling it ethnic cleansing. This is utter nonsense. In the legal books of international law, there is no term called ethnic cleansing. This term was used by Milosevic, the butcher of Bosnia, to give a lighter term to genocide, which he was committing in Europe. This young man, when I was talking, he was standing silent. I started talking to him. His name is Nur Muhammad. And so when I spoke to him, he lost both parents, saw them being killed, 4 sisters, 3 brothers. And I said, do you have any memory left? So in his little cell phone, he had 3 little children. I said, where are they? He said, they were killed also along with their mother. Those were children of his brother. I asked, what grade were you? He's 16-year-old. He said, he looked at the surprise as though, I don't know. He said, don't you know that Rohingyas are not allowed to study and go to school? This lady, Rashida Begum, just got released actually last Thursday from, thank God for Doctors Without Borders. And she ran, but was grabbed, raped, and her baby was snatched from her hand and killed by smashing on the roadside. And then she was, of course, attacked. You can see bandages on her. So the people who are inside, in Bangladesh, at least they have problem with food and shelter and huts and whatnot. But people who are inside, this is from 2012. Some sympathetic person took a, so in the background is burning of their houses. And military, and in box is the military. They were marched to what New York Times called the 21st century concentration camps. There are 100 of those, 120,000 people there since 2012. They're building more of that. And Professor Penny Green of Queen Mary University at London, a good colleague in our cause to fight this genocide, she was expelled from Burma, but her research was how they're being treated. And she says they're being given food which is equivalent to Nazi concentration camp. That's why some people die out of hunger. Other people die because of absence of medicine. And if they are not in concentration camp, there are still people inside Burma who they are attacking, how they are being treated. This is a comparative chart. Buddhist neighbors are, of course, citizens. Rohingyas, who are indigenous people living in their ancestral land. Listen to me this again. They are indigenous people living in their ancestral land, are subject to the systemic elimination by the government. Their citizenship was taken away in 1982. Otherwise, they always were citizen, always. They always elected their representative. This is the only parliament in which they do not have a representative. Burmese neighbors, so Buddhist neighbors, can live in their own homes. Rohingya Muslim, of course, with tragedy is huge. And they go home by home to see where are your papers, whatever they need to provide. So I had a photo of a 18-month girl who was found meeting grandpa and was put in prison for 2 years with her parents just because they didn't have permit to travel. Buddhist neighbors have one physician for 700 people, and they have, when they had, no longer now, 83,000 Rohingya have one physician. Buddhist neighbor have no fear of rape and accept a random criminal. And United Nations have thoroughly documented how Rohingyas are raped. Buddhist neighbor can marry without a permit. And you being in here, you say, what's the big deal about a permit if Muslims have to take it? Except that it is rarely given. It requires bribery. If you marry without a permit, it's a 10-year in prison. By law, there are 10 laws, and we have documentation of that, which discriminate in apartheid situation. They can have as many children as they like. Rohingyas can by law have only 2. They can seek a school admission. They cannot enter a school. They can have a job. They cannot have a job. They can travel freely. They cannot travel freely. They can worship freely. 360 mosques have been destroyed and often not allowed to enter. So when you went in Bangladesh, as I landed in the airport, I started moving. For a couple of miles, there'll be, normal Bangladesh. Then the police army post, which they cannot leave. They are not free to leave that area in Bangladesh. When you enter there, you will see random families here and there, few yards away. As you move deeper, those random becomes almost every foot or 2 apart. And those who have some money left, so I asked some of the people why they're standing on the roadside. They say, well, we just came. We do not have any money to buy bamboo or plastic sheet. Bamboo and plastic sheet define all their homes there. I found only 2 UNHCR tent. Remember UNHCR written on the white one? Most of them were like this, bamboo and a plastic sheet, and you can see mud and all of that, and that's how you have to cross if you want to go in. So food, there are 7 distribution points, more needed, and one road they have a small, tiny artery, which is almost blocked, and God forbid any minister or any officer showed up, it's completely blocked for hours. Well-meaning Bangladeshis are coming all over, bringing whatever they can bring. But it's a chaotic situation, and I will say what we can do about that. But little bit about rape being used. We have a complete map. Each rape report, we put it on a Google map. And United Nations surveyed women, and they say 52% of all women they surveyed were raped. A Rohingya attorney who became attorney in Bangladesh was able to get to school there. 100% of everybody she has interviewed, she said, have been raped. So Burma Task Force is a coalition here, and we invite you to join that. Our current effort is 3. I spoke to, the State Department in charge of Burma desk and this one and that one. There is such a chaos in our country. God forgive us. The Secretary of State right now is in North Korea, and the Twitter-in-chief is tweeting that he's wasting his time. Now you can realize how difficult it is to handle the Rohingya issue. So thanks to Haley, our head of mission in United Nations, there is something. So we're more focused on Canada, France, and Germany for the leadership at this moment. We're documenting Chola-Toli very thoroughly, and we are working on some scholars to do a random sample survey to determine losses, because if one village has 1,700 people dying and 284 villages have been attacked, even if that ratio is not applied, still there is going to be substantial amount of it. So you can all support Senate Resolution 250 and working in the United Nations. Bangladesh government, we are working with them, met the ambassadors in a couple of countries and chair of their Human Rights Commission. There's a whole lot of work there. We have done many things in the past, including House Resolution 418. America at the time of Obama became the first elected parliament who has a resolution in support of Rohingya. And Obama consistently spoke. Since then, access is difficult. We got, thanks to our friend Desmond Tutu. By the way, Dalai Lama, which you mentioned, is a good friend, and he comes whenever I ask him. He issued a statement whenever I ask him. But he also gave out a secret. He said, the type of Buddhism I follow, that's a very different Buddhism in Burma. They don't consider me their leader, so I will keep issuing as much a statement as you want. Nobody listens to me there. So this is our hut office, our Burma Task Force there. It was just yesterday photo. Now they have little plastic sheet on it. And these 2 Rohingyas who came 18 years ago are very good helper for us. She is doing the outreach for us for the rape victim. We're focusing on teenage rape victim because some of them are being trafficked, and we have found one actually in India, which we're trying to get her back, and we don't know what to do because she has no papers, either of Burma or Bangladesh or India. So she's sitting in prison now. So this is their house. So they came 18 years ago. This is their house. And this house has also the same bamboo and plastic made. They were kind enough to invite me, so I have to almost bend down to enter. And this is one of the rape victims, a 13-year-old girl who now has, and parents were murdered before she was raped. So she has learned to sew and making some money there. This is another victim. She's 16-year-old. She got a good news, thought her father is killed, but her father was found and arrived there. So these are three asks which we have. Number one, call it a genocide. Number two, create safe zone inside Burma with peacekeepers' mandate to defend it. We're asking our government and other government. Help airlift of shelter, food, and medicine is urgently needed. And because it's a difficult terrain, it requires a helicopter fleet. These are the things Bangladeshi governments need right now. Why it's a genocide? I already mentioned, people say textbook case of ethnic cleansing. That United Nations officer probably had not read any textbook. There is nothing in textbooks called ethnic cleansing. Was used by a killer in Bosnia, and they are hiding behind that. Why we want to call it genocide? Because genocide is a crime, and we are signatory to genocide treaty. It requires us to interfere and stop. And when that term was being used in reference to Bosnia, then some people tried to stop. 7 Nobel laureate signed a statement which I wrote that is a textbook case of genocide. French president have said it. Bangladesh foreign minister has said it's a genocide. And recently we held scholars of genocide, a tribunal on Myanmar. Evidence was presented by scholars just 2 weeks ago, and judges from 7 countries declared it is genocide. So we need your help to keep the media alive. They are moving away from that story. We need your help to put pressure, because without that, it cannot be done. So 3 things I would say. If you have cell phone, do it now. Go burmamuslim.org, get involved, and sign up there what you can do and your skill set. If possible, donate. Subscribe to our newsletter right there and circulate to your friend. We have 2 or 3 action alerts to work on it, and push for Senate Resolution 250. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace upon to you. Thank you so much for Brother Mali Mujahid, Brother Azim Ibrahim. It's very hard work for Rohingya people issue. Also, thank you so much for everyone coming to join us. And thank you so much for Buddhist community. This is my first time I see. And thank you so much. So, my name is Nasir Zakaria. I am the ethnic Rohingya. So, today we are standing here in Chicago. We have by Zakar Foundation. They provide us one of the pays for rent, for utility bill, for director salary. So they give us one place. So we do activity here for about education, ESL class, for tutoring, for homework, for kids, for Quran class. So we try to learn here about education is important for me, because when I come here 2013, so I'm free from refugee life, because this country freedom for everyone, human being, human right. So when I come here, so is how important freedom for people. Human being, what does it mean? So when I come here, so I feel this word is, this is the human being, this is the human right. So, and today I'm here, I'm not education people, I don't have any education people, I just zero zero, we start here to A to, we learn here from A to B. So today in my country, people, they need help you because I have I just share with you my history when I'm 14 years old and I left my country because 14 years old, they had to go to school, actually, but we can't go to school. They're folks to don't become education for Rohingya people. So this is not me, everyone. So mostly that's why people, our people, low education because the government, the folks don't go into a school. They put in pharma, so just your life like animal life, something like that. So, and today some our people, they don't speak Burmese language because they can go to school. They can communicate each other, Burmese and Rohingya, because they can go allowed to their village. So how can they can speak language? So then what they say, you are the Bengalis from Bangladesh. So this kind of the planning. So every day, every time we saw video news, so sometimes we can sleep. Especially I can sleep whole night sometimes. Today we hear our Rohingya people ethnic in Chicago live in 1,500 people here. Everyone separate village. So every day we have news from our village. They send voice, they send video, they use our language. So every day we have information, what's going on, what Burmese military, what they do, how many people they're killing, how many people, house they're burning. So every day we have information, but we don't have any power to share this kind of problem because number one, we don't have power, education people, no doctor, no lawyer. So then we can stand by self for our people. So like Brother Malik, Brother Azim Ibrahim, so very hard work for our people. So what I want to say is genocide is how can they kill a small baby, 1 week baby, they cut by knife, they throw it in, burn up the house. So this is terrible. So sometime every day, our people call me every time, every night. So this kind of happening like this. So for example, my village people, they leave their village right now because military, they kind of give problem, reason they can go work, they can go outside. So this is Rohingya Muslim mother. So some translator will write down some of the, I didn't, so I had to, I'm sorry, I'm excused for about this dead body because I had to no choice. You have to know everything. So this is Rohingya life. So the bomb, the mine, the military put it, the village in our, so you see father hold their son. So this is Hmong people, everyone they have gun, this is not police. So they kill Rohingya people, they take their property. So this kind of situation right now. So this is in jungle. look, you see, baby holded mother, small child. So this is last 2 days ago. The people going to jungle. They leave their village. So thousand people carry kids, some food. So 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 this kind of when they go into jungle. So what happened after that? The military of some Hmong people, they waiting for these people. So what they do, they kill. So because so many dead body in Arkan, the whole jungle area, because we have all the time the news, because only our people is they live. So only what they give information only by use this cell phone, because no media allowed to in Burma, no any organization can go in Burma. So this is we want to share you, because this one is very important for me. You had to know what's going on in Burma. So last two weeks ago, 1 week ago, the military, the government, they bring media. They find out some dead body. So some Hindu woman they bring to front of the dead body, some kids. What they say, this is Rohingya people attack Buddhist, Hindu people. So this is not true. So they bring dead body, they find out dead body. Every dead body is Rohingya ethnic. So this is right now, government, they fake news. They try to one more problem for by Hindu. Hindu is minority so small. We love peace because we stay together long generation, Hindu and Buddhist. So Buddhist is not say is everyone is bad. Some Buddhists, I have some Buddhist friend, because I live in Buddhist area around the village. So what happened is like I think is government, they do everything. They pay money for bad people, so then they say this is Buddhist or something like that. So religion is not terrorist. So religion, every religion, they like peace. So I'm the Muslim. Religion is, they don't teach any problem, bad thing. So some people right now is government is try to fake news for this genocide, because all of the country they know about what they do right now. So and also we have everyday news. If you like to know something about Rohingya issue, please join us. So we have also, we put all the time news, our website, RCC, www.rccchicago.com. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think it might be easier if I just sit here, and we're going to get to our question and answer part of the program. So, thank you, all three of you, for just terrific presentations about what's happening there and the historical context and the urgency of action, for international action. So I guess my first question, and anybody can take it and go wherever it leads you. This is more of a, feel free to talk as much as you want, I guess. I'm curious about the lack of international attention to the Rohingya crisis and the genocide there. That this is obviously a very long history of persecution that doesn't seem to be very well understood, and then there's been very several several spates of massive violence over the last few years, and it really seems like this one in 2017 is the only one that got very much international attention, and then even that, as you said, it's starting to fade. And so I'm kind of curious about what you think is the causes of some of these. You know, why is the international community not getting this information, and why is it starting to fade away again?
Yeah, so the United Nations described the Rohingya as the most persecuted minority in the world, but they also actually described them as the most friendless people in the world as well. One of the difficulties the Rohingya have is that they really are the lowest of the low. There's like hardly anybody amongst them that has an education. You know, their traditional trade has always been fishermen, farmers, or labourers. There's nobody of Rohingya origin, for example, in Silicon Valley that's made tons of money from an app that can say, I'm going to put $5 million of my money into a public awareness campaign for my people. There's nobody of Rohingya origin working for CNN or the BBC. There's nobody of Rohingya origin elected to any of the parliaments in Europe. You know, there are people that are literally right at the bottom of the ladder. So they have had huge difficulty advocating for themselves. Like, all of yous are here for a talk on the Rohingya. I don't think any of yous can name me a single Rohingya person, a famous Rohingya person, because there aren't any, essentially. And this is the difficulty that they have, is that they're right at the bottom of the ladder. There's hardly anybody amongst them that is, advocating for them. But there's other factors at play as well here. Is that one of the reasons why the Rohingya issue has particularly at this time, has gotten so little attention is because of, I believe, because of the issue of Aung San Suu Kyi. She is the most famous citizen of Myanmar. She's a Nobel laureate. And we in the West have this tendency of putting people on a pedestal. And, we like to have our heroes untarnished. And her story is probably one of the best stories you'll come across. The daughter of one of the founding generals of Myanmar, placed under house arrest by her father's former colleagues, Oxford educated, Nobel laureate, beautiful, articulate, speaks the Queen's English. Now she's out of prison, she's opening up her country to democracy and human rights. This is fantastic. This is the kind of stuff you make Hollywood movies out of, but there's actually a darker side to that. And this is a fundamental mistake that Western leaders are making, is that they're putting the faith in her. They don't want to interfere or intervene or to upset the balance. They believe that if we put too much pressure on Myanmar, there may be a military coup, and then we'll go back to the dark days of military dictatorship. And this is a myth that has been perpetuated by her supporters and her friends. The probability of a military coup is next to zero. The military is actually very happy in the current situation that they're in. The current system that places Aung San Suu Kyi as a state councillor, not the president, is a system that they created. They're happy to have a quarter of the seats in parliament and controlling the major ministries, and using her as a spokesperson to justify their crimes. And now sanctions, she managed to get all sanctions lifted off Myanmar, and the military's, General Min Aung Hlaing, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, was on a spending spree earlier this year around Europe, buying armaments for his military. So they completely they have legitimized the military. And so the probability of a military coup is very little. And the difficulty is that Western leaders are unable or unwilling to actually intervene or say anything because they don't want to upset the balance. And this is a real difficulty. There's also geopolitical reasons which I could go into, but much more if we had much more time. But essentially, President Obama visited Myanmar twice. In 2012 was his first visit, and for any country to get a visit from the President of the United States is a very big deal. And one of the reasons the President visited is because they believe that as Myanmar starts opening up, it'll fall under the sphere of influence of China. The whole of Southeast Asia is being reconfigured to meet one purpose, and that's to meet China's insatiable demand for resources. Like in Pakistan, for example, China is the biggest investor, $56 billion they invested over the last few years. And Myanmar is the same. China is the biggest investor, building railroads, highways, ports, everything. And as it falls in the sphere of influence of China, that will change the strategic calculus of that region. It will give China access to the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean, which China does not have at the moment. So the US is much more interested in keeping, trying to keep Myanmar within its own sphere of influence than to hold up these human rights issues. So when geopolitical calculations on that scale are going on, and you insert the Rohingya into the picture, it doesn't fit into that calculation, on these on that scale.
I will add to that, because of the current U.S. situation here, State Department is at disarray. And UK, because of what is it called, Brexit and Brexit, they are lost in that. So these two used to be allies who will take a stand on it. And England, being the former colonial lord of that area, probably will take a lead in telling US what to do. So these two are lost. Europe has a new leadership emerging, which is France and Germany. And I think there is a good possibility, because after a long period of time, there is an advocate, which is Bangladeshi government, whose attitude used to be very negative. And I showed you photos of people who came 18-year-old that is still living in the plastic and bamboo huts as the recent refugees. They're taking a stand, and they are the one who asked creation of safe zone in Burma, protected by peacekeepers. Burma Task Force only like that to be modified to add that those safe zone peacekeepers should have mandate to protect. Because in Bosnia, safe zone became killing zone because they were there and peacekeepers did not stood up against the attacks by Serbs. So 7,000 people were massacred in Srebrenica. So I think at this moment, at least, there is a champion who has received all those things. That was not the case. So nobody knew name Rohingya, by the way, 5-6 years ago. It's thanks to the social media used by Rohingya, everybody being equipped by cell phone. It is to their credit that their story in last 5 years started coming out, and a world leader started saying Rohingyas are some people. So I think their cause is more known, and if we put a good pressure, it is possible, much more possible today than it was possible, say, 10 years ago, that some international intervention will take place. I don't want to raise hope, but there is a possibility because there are champions now.
Well, thank you both for that. Let's hope that we can keep the pressure on and keep this in the news, so that this issue keeps going. I have a few other questions. You've touched on a lot of them in the talks. So one of the things that I can't quite wrap my head around from the news coverage is to what degree is the military doing something? To what degree is it communal violence from one group inside villages to the other? It sounds like both of these things are happening, and they might have different different causes and different ways to stop some of them. And I wonder if you could just speak more about those issues.
I would say historically, Rakhine and Rohingyas were struggling together for that state. The earliest coin of Burma actually are the coin of the Rakhine people. They used to have a state several 100 years ago. It's the military which has started playing the divide and rule game. They are the one who do that. So when I spent recently, just last week, time with Rohingya people, so of course you're talking to one person, and it's just a graduate situation. The alley between huts will not be that bigger than this, so people will just stay and talk. So when there are crowd, then I'll ask general question. One of the question I ask will be that how many of you personally saw somebody killed? And 40, 50, 60% will raise hand, including children. I thought maybe they came from the same place and these are same people. When I asked them, no. Second question asked, who was killing them? The first word they will use is military. Once in a while they will say Rakhine. In the case of Tolotoli, which I want all of you to say with me, Tolotoli. Come on, Tolotoli. That word need to be remembered and repeated, because that's the only evidence at this moment to refute how many people got killed. When you project it to 284 people, it comes to be hundreds and thousands of people who are being killed. So Tolotoli is the place. A strange answer which people gave me, that Buddhist Rakhine mayor was the one who were plotting and all that. We got a lot of things, dirt on him. But they were saying the common Buddhist, they were friendly. They were not involved in this. I did not get from Tolotoli, if they're just one village, I did not get many people saying that they were involved in that. I mean, so I like to put out, despite there's a widespread hatred and all of that, it is military which is primarily responsible for doing all of these things.
There is no doubt that the current crisis has been organised and executed by the military. I actually wrote a piece in Newsweek last year, in December, this is all in the public record, in which I warned that the military is actually preparing for a massive operation to rid the villages and the Rakhine district of the Rohingya. And as I mentioned in my presentation, General Min Aung Hlaing went on a spending spree to buy military armaments around Europe to assist in that endeavour. He got the red carpet treatment in Austria and Germany, and I wrote to both their ambassadors, and that is also in the public domain. I printed those in Huffington Post much later. So the military claims that they're reacting to an attack on the 25th of August, which was just last month. However, they have been in preparation for this for quite considerable time. General Min Aung Hlaing said on his Facebook page, I think about 2 weeks ago, that this is unfinished business from 1942 to remove the illegal Bengalis from our country. So it's absolutely clear to me what their primary motivation is here. You know, they claim to be fighting militants, but in reality they're engaged in a campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide against the Rohingya people who they have been preparing for some time. But the fact is that you know, when genocide occurs, it does not happen in isolation. You look at all the genocides in history, you know, we claim that we only became aware of them, or we had no idea something like this would happen, you know, whether it's Rwanda or Darfur. Genocides actually take decades upon decades, sometimes generation of preparation, you know, for the stigmatization, otherization, and the dehumanization of an entire people to the extent that you no longer see them as your fellow human beings. It takes a considerable amount of time. So the groundwork of this was being laid, you know, for quite some time. I showed you some of the newspaper clippings, but you know, the stigmatization was going on for quite some time, and I think there was many international experts that predicted that this would actually happen. And you know, but it's being organized and executed by the military, along with many other extremist elements within the Rakhine district.
Until you can look at this, like 2012, the reason one woman they kill it, so they start 2012 they start killing again people. So one of the 9 October, so they say one Buddhist people we don't find it, so Rohingya village people they kill it. So reason 2. So this is always they give reason. Military they try to clean our Rohingya village. So last 2 weeks ago, the one village, they live in 1,200 families. So the military say, you can allow any way you can go, only live at home, you can go to buy bazaar, something like that, you can buy, they can buy food. So they have to live in their house. So what happened? Night, the military, they bomb in jungle. So, oh, it's terrorists coming. This is you guys support to terrorists. The reason they come in. So people more scary. They come again, they kill again. So what people think, if we don't want to leave this village, they want to kill us. So last 2 days ago, the military general, Myonglai, he go to in Arkhana state. He said we looking for 4,000 terrorist group people, young people. So we went to operation again. So people, everyone worry about this. This is unsafe. We want to leave our country. Wherever they kill in jungle, but we have no choice. We want to leave our country. So reason is, oh, this is happening because the Rohingya people know, because no proof they attack military camp. Is no picture, no nothing. So always the reason is they try to, attack for Rohingya. So and in a refugee camp right now, more than 6,000 kids without father, mother. So where their parents they go? Only if United Nations peacekeeper, if they go into Arkhana state, so they can find out dead body, everything.
Thank you. Well, most of the questions that I had were answered in your presentation. So I guess the one question that I wanted to get at was a little bit more of the status of refugees, and we talked about Bangladesh. I keep hearing reports out of India that they are responding negatively to it, and given the climate there, sometimes there's it's not just India and Bangladesh or other places, but there's including the United States and in Europe, there's a sort of a global anti-refugee, especially if they're Muslim refugee sentiment, and I'm wondering just how they're welcomed in the neighboring countries, and if the UN High Commissioner on Refugees is able to assist them well enough, or how to get them the right resources to provide some relief for that problem.
I'm fully aware there's a lot of suspicion around Muslim refugees, and there's been a lot of confusion about the militant attacks. Yeah, and on that front, I'd just like to say that when Aung San Suu Kyi came to power, she set up a number of commissions to look at the civil wars in Myanmar. Almost every ethnic group was at war with the central government since its independence. She set up this commission called the Pong Long Tu, which to examine the civil wars and try to come up with some sort of dialogue and eventual solution. The Rohingya minority were not included in those discussions. They were not including because they were considered a non-violent and non-militant ethnic minority. They did not have an armed wing. So this is clear evidence that much of the accusations made against the Rohingya that they have a history of militancy and so on were patently false, because this is acknowledged by the military itself. Subsequently, we've seen an organisation emerge, the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Front, Salvation Army, which is getting a considerable amount of coverage. It's a little-known entity with very little resources and doesn't necessarily pose a significant strategic threat to the state of Myanmar. But despite that, the response of the government of Myanmar has been overwhelming and disproportionate. In terms of the refugees, we've had 500,000 flow into Bangladesh. A country like Bangladesh is not able to absorb those kinds of numbers. They are very poor themselves. They're struggling to feed their own population. The official policy of the government of Bangladesh since the 1990s has been to refuse Rohingya entry into Bangladesh and to return them to their country of Myanmar. During the recent crisis, they turned a blind eye to this, and this is thanks to the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for doing this. She's opened the borders to let them flow through. But the reality is that it is not the responsibility of Bangladesh to take those citizens in. it is a responsibility of Myanmar to first of all stop expelling them, and now to figure out a way to actually take them back. The Rohingya are indigenous people. They have been there for almost, historians say, over 8 centuries, and they deserve to live in the country of their birth, and they deserve to, be citizens of their own country. Some people say the government of Bangladesh has been quite harsh in confining them to the camps and, not letting them melt into the regular population. But this policy that they actually have is the correct policy, because the Myanmar itself has said that the solution to the Rohingya crisis is that they should all leave. All the Rohingya should leave, and some third country should take them all in. And this is ethnic cleansing. This is legitimized ethnic cleansing that they want. It is not the responsibility of Bangladesh to take them in. It is the responsibility of Myanmar to look after their own citizens.
Refugees face tremendous amount of challenges. In Bangladesh and India, Kuala Lumpur, they are not allowed to have public education. So education denied in Burma is being denied in other places as well. There are about 350,000 Rohingyas in Pakistan. Until a few years ago, when this war or terror began, and reference to Afghanistan and whatnot, those refugees were given citizenships. And the leader of Rohingya here, Dr. Waqar Hussain, is a graduate from Pakistani University, and he's a professor in Pittsburgh. Dr. Ambiya Parveen is a physician. She went to Pakistan, became citizen, now leaders of Rohingyas in Germany. So in several countries, you have leaders who went there. But unfortunately, Pakistan, because of this whole international anti-terrorism stuff, has stopped giving them citizenship. So a lot of them still walk towards Pakistan, and since Punjab is the area, Indian Punjab, so Indian Punjab is multiplying the Muslim population. These are Rohingyas who go there, Sikhs are entrepreneurs, they need labor, agricultural labor, they get laborers there and live there. The mosques, which were abandoned 50 years ago, are being restored. But recent one, about 40,000 India wants, government has said, and that we're going to expel them. Where? Which country going to take them? Saudi Arabia, I'm extremely critical of Saudi Arabia, but it has given permanent residency to 200,000 Rohingyas who are good in business and all that. Not citizen, but permanent residency, so they could be there. So I think the countries where refugees are, they need to allow them to be registered with the United Nations as a refugee. Bangladesh need to do that, Malaysia need to do that, all other countries need to do that. Second thing, they need to allow them full educational rights. They need to allow them full rights to earn their livelihood until they're refugees. So I think these countries need a pressure. Right now, we can't pressurize them. We are looking for their help in stopping this genocide. But I don't think their treatment, even before the worldwide cry against refugees, was any better. And I'm very sorry to see Pakistan, which has been a welcoming place, has become, they allow them to work. That's not a problem. But public education, they have to pay to get to private schooling. This is a new development.
Bangladesh is almost 700,000. So India 40, Indonesia 15,000, Sri Lanka also, and Malaysia 200,000. So imagine the future for education, like Brother Malik say, future we need education for our kids, young generation. So it's important is United Nations only, if they bring refugee, they take out, is not work. We need right back our citizenship. We need our mother country back. everyone, I mean, they can, for future, for kids, education, everything. So I think it's United Nations is important for pressure to Burmese government allowed to, because only we are, life is going to refugee life. So we don't want to be going to refugee life. It's 100,000 people. So we need our country back, right, everything. So I think it's important for United Nations.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I think what I'd like to do now is just give you all a chance to talk about some actionable items that we can do to help. We've talked about supporting some resolutions, Resolution 250 in the Senate. We've talked about putting some pressure on some people. I've got some contact information here I can pass out for senators, and you can tweet it. The United Nations ambassador, or ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. But I would like to get your opinions on some of the best organizations of support to maybe provide some relief in the short term. And then, Nasir, I want you to spend some time talking about how maybe people can get involved in the Rohingya Culture Center and help more locally.
Rohingya Culture Center is shortly RCC. Everyone will come, help us, teaching us. We need more volunteer about our kids. So first, it's important for me is for our kids' future. We want to we try to give them, remind them who they are, where from. So education is very important. Please join us, and we open door for everyone. So, and especially without volunteer, we can actually I can do anything, because volunteer is most important for us, because we are non-profit organization. We can hire anyone, teacher, something. So we have some beautiful families, volunteers. They work together, so teaching our kids, and for Adele, for ESL class, everything. So everyone welcome. If anyone like to volunteer, please welcome.
I think the first thing we have to do is to educate ourselves into exactly what is happening and try to stay informed, which isn't necessarily very easy as the news cycle continuously moves on. I think we need to add Myanmar onto the list of countries that have issues to be resolved. When you mention Syria or Libya, Kashmir or Palestine, these are countries that have serious internal issues that have to be resolved. I think we have to add Myanmar onto that list as well. And I think we also have to put considerable more pressure on our leaders to hold Aung San Suu Kyi to account. There's a lot of people are deeply concerned. They say, well, look, she doesn't have a lot of power. It's a military that's in full control. She doesn't control the military directly, and that's certainly true. Aung San Suu Kyi does not have control over the military, but she has essentially now become a spokesperson and a shield for the military. When she draws the moral equivalence between the Rohingya, saying that both sides are equally to blame for the violence, that to me is the moral equivalence of saying both the Jews and the Nazis were to blame for the Holocaust, or both the blacks and the whites were to blame for apartheid South Africa. It is moral bankruptcy, and I think most of our supporters will be hugely disappointed. There's also the element of the fact that she actually believes in a lot the military are actually doing. One of the reasons, I published a piece in Newsweek last week, and I urge everybody to have a look at it, because I interviewed a number of people who have known her for decades. One of them was actually the head of the UK Burma campaign, who set up the Free Aung San Suu Kyi campaign almost 2 decades ago. And another one was an Australian Member of Parliament who was the first person to meet her after she was released from house arrest in 2010. He was the first Westerner to actually meet with her. And they've all told me the same thing, and these are just 2 that I went on record. A number of people I've met who are interviewed have told me the same thing, that she's a Buddhist supremacist. She actually believes in what the military is doing. She believes that Burma is a Buddhist country that just happens to have those ethnic minorities in it. And she doesn't believe in the multi-ethnicity of Burma, and there's considerable evidence for this. So I urge you to look at that piece, and then urge you to look at the evidence. And I think our Western leaders really have to hold her to account. She's a moral conscience of that country. She's the most famous citizen of that country, and this idea that the military is just waiting to undertake a military coup is just a myth. And she's now become a shield and a spokesperson for the military action.
What week was that, the article?
It was published last week. The article is called "How We Were Seduced by Aung San Suu Kyi," and it's in Newsweek. Just one final thing, and this is something that we in the West we happen to do very often. You know, we have this idea that because she's educated in Oxford, she's one of us, she's going to go back to her country. We made the same mistake a number of times. You know, those that don't learn history are condemned to repeat it. You know, we have the same attitude towards these Oxford educated Saudi princes that are going to go back and reform their countries. The same thing we had with Saif al-Gaddafi. Remember, a PhD from the London School of Economics, he's going to be the great reformer. And he was, you know, that just wasn't the case. And the same thing with actually the best example is probably Kim Jong-un today. You know, educated at Swiss boarding school. We all believe that, well, he's going to reform his country, bring it in from the cold, and now he's threatening us all with nuclear annihilation. You know, the fact that these people are ideologically committed, they have come from a particular mindset, and whether they're educated in the West or not actually has very little implications for them, for their ideological outlook. And she has a history of being a Burma Buddhist nationalist. In fact, one of the articles that she wrote when her father was, when she was in prison, she wrote an article about her father, saying how proud she is of her father. He was one of the founding generals of Myanmar. But she actually said in that article that we are proud Buddhists, we are not like the Kalar. That is the equivalent of saying the N-word in the United States. You know, we are proud Americans, we're not like those with the N-word. It is a highly derogatory term. This is all in writing. This is the ideology that she has. She has not shifted, she has not changed. You know, this is what she's always believed in.
Well, thank you for that. It reminds me of this big, I mean, I just want to connect us to this bigger issue. It's not that there's a bigger issue really on the planet, but to sort of a conceptual issue of majoritarian nationalism, of the idea that because we have these borders that are set up for maybe arbitrary reasons, from colonialism or for something else, or even from international wars or whatever, that that the majority, if the majority gets it in their brain that the definition of citizenship and those borders are the same, and that majority is the only one that is legitimate, and they start to make the minority group a second-class citizen or take it away. This sets the stage for the worst things that can happen in a country, and we're seeing great waves of this. I mean, in Burma right now, we're seeing the absolute worst that it can get. But lots of countries are going through the beginning stages of something like this, and that doesn't mean that it's all going to end up in a genocide, but it is setting the stage. That idea that a country is for the majority and not for the other people is just an idea that has to die. We have to do what we can to stop that, the spread of that idea, and push for the idea of a full citizenship to everyone in those countries. Including our own. So I want to end that as far, I guess, as the formal part. I want to open the floor up to questions from the audience. We have a microphone up the front, and if you could please use that, then that way we can get the feed into the Chicago Access Network. If you can just feel free to stand up and walk over there and ask your question. It's no problem. Yes, Jack. Yeah, that's fine. We're here.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to sneak a couple questions in, but I think they're short. One is there anything ordinary citizens in the United States can do to help induce the United Nations to provide funds to Bangladesh or other nearby countries that are accepting refugees? Secondly, apart from the Rohingya Center here in Chicago, are there other avenues for making donations that will have a chance of getting effectively to the country, to refugees within a short period of time? And lastly, is there any truth to the rumors about landmines being placed along the border to prevent people from returning home? Thank you.
These are not rumors. They have been documented with actual photos. There are injured people, landmines. So what happened was that when world media started paying attention, they figured out where the people are coming from. So the known routes, there is military blocking them. Unknown and difficult route, they are putting mines in those areas. And Doctors Without Borders has treated those people, and people have taken photographs of those things. This thing, independent documentation exists, but of course from Burmese side, it is not allowed for people to go. The relief help situation is very complex. We had a meeting of Burma Task Force with the Bangladeshi ambassador to the United States and to Bangladeshi ambassador in Malaysia. Also the delegation headed by the chair of the Bangladesh Human Rights Commission. They all insist that all funds must be given to the government. We're asking them that US relief entities, especially the Muslim entity who are aware of this case, they're pretty organized groups. I mean, right now there are several hundred Muslim volunteers and staff who are still working in Houston area. Just one organization has 200 volunteers still going around. So it's pretty organized operation, but they say that we will not allow. Now, some of them have developed collaboration inside with Bangladesh NGOs, and they are sending them funds so they could use. But then now come more restrictions that one of the major organization here who had relationship, now they are told that you need to get approval from the Bangladeshi government, and their application was rejected, what they could do. Digging well, because its water is a major problem, they're asking have to have a shallow well. The danger there is that it will have arsenic. So people are willing to fund deeper, but they think if you're going to have deeper well, people will be permanent. So they're still trying to make sure there's nothing permanency comes in. So the organization which are working there, about 4 or 5 different entities of the United Nations, they have a coordinating group and they are swift to respond. So we are in communication with them. We have about 150 volunteer physicians ready to go. So they approach the Bangladeshi government and say, no, we don't want any physicians to come in, while there is definitely a need. So situation is complex, and that's where we think the United States citizens can play a greater role. Insisting on a State Department, I mean, their attitude have changed. We have literally generated tens of thousands of calls. Many times their voicemail will be all full. That many calls have been placed. But I think relationship, Illinois delegation of congresspersons, of course, Durban is co-sponsor of 250, but they need to insist. They need to talk actively to taking a delegation of people talking with them. Since it's a university, maybe we are starting a petition that why scholars of all over the world agree. I mean, I organized conference in Harvard, in Oxford, London School of Economics, St. Louis University, Colorado University. Scholar after scholars have written paper and they agree it's a genocide. So maybe a petition developed by scholars of political science, international relations, and law, that it is a genocide. I think until you get to that point, governments are not going to act. Cox's Bazar Airport, there is not a single plane bringing any aids whatsoever. I mean, initially, Turkey, Pakistan, and Malaysia, a few other countries sent something, but there is no outpouring of help for these people. all left to the Bangladeshi government, and I'm glad they're opening up, but they need help in this. So Doctors Without Borders is the only entity I will recommend, and they don't take designated funds. They don't take designated fund. I communicated with their office, but you will have to just fund them, and their operation are substantially, good and much needed. If more funds are available, for example, there are so many rape victims there, and we're taking care of some of them and have some program, but they have one counselor in the whole area where there are 1 million people. 500,000 came now, and if 52% are raped, just imagine how much need is there. And there are physicians willing to go from here. So our State Department, USAID, anybody has a relationship and cousins and this and that, we're willing to work with them. There's tremendous need of help, and help is not getting there.
I don't know if this makes sense, if it's culturally sensitive. Earlier you mentioned there were thousands of kids orphaned without parents. Can we start a program called Save the Rohingya Children? And by adopting them to the United States, at least some kids can get out. People are so refugee fatigued. But, maybe the children will be more acceptable.
That will require Bangladeshi government agreeing to that. You see, they are paperless people. I mean, some people have papers of this sort or that sort. We're documenting them. But, we can adopt, but how they're going to travel unless Bangladeshi government first, UNHCR registered them. There are close to 11,000 orphans which have been recorded, who just showed up. And, they saw villagers going that way, parents are killed in front of them, so they walked with them. So numbers are true, there may be more. But adopting will require papers, which can only be provided by UNHCR. And UNHCR at this moment is not allowed to register those people. Only 30,000 register. Bangladeshi government human rights commissioner chairman told me they are registering people for some other purposes, and they are 600 people per day. So unless they're registered, they are nobody, they are no entity. Only then that process can begin. So there are some people in Germany who came up with this idea and were willing to help. So what is happening is, for example, a girl of 10-year-old and parents were killed, and a neighbor, she just walked, and neighbor spotted her on the street. They say, okay, you can stay with us and things like that. So that's how some children are taken care of. But adoption is a great idea, and I think that requires us to push Bangladesh to allow UNHCR to formally register them as a refugee, and then there will be a process to deal with.
Is there any effort like that going on?
Well, political pressure is needed. Our political pressure is focused on 3 things right now, because you cannot ask people to do too many things. But if a group here forms that, hey, we're going to focus on this, why Bangladesh is not allowing UNHCR to register all of them as refugee, then we can provide support and guidance and expert help. But at this moment, we have 3 demands. Call it a genocide, because that invokes the Genocide Treaty, which 150 countries have signed. Second, support the Bangladeshi government demand, which brother is saying also here, that they are citizens of Myanmar. There should be a safe zone inside with peacekeeper. We are adding to that the peacekeeper with the mandate to defend when military attacks them. And the third demand is from each government of the world to have airlift of shelters, medicine, and food. So we are focused on 3 things. But that's a legitimate cause, and if some group wants to work, we will help them on that particular group that, just focus on getting that. Another group can focus on all these countries to provide them free education. I mean, they're providing to their citizen. What type of a load is that for India to not allow 40,000 refugees, say 20,000 of them to go to education? What load is for Malaysia? to have children go to education. I think so. We need more people to get involved in this, and I hope many of you will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your efforts. My question was like, can you just put some light on medical efforts going on there, like clinics or MSF you talked about, and especially in Cox's Bazar area and Chittagong area, if you can just put some light for me. Thank you.
You know, that area in Bangladesh is very poor to begin with as compared to the rest of the Bangladesh. And is logistically also very different, very difficult. It's like Florida, except it's not that wide in the north at all, and it's just lengthy, and you know, it's difficult to navigate except that one tiny artery which it has. So Doctors Without Borders, wherever I met a refugee who was injured, he was treated by Doctors Without Borders. I saw their vans. They were the only medical vans I saw. They're the only medical clinics which I saw. So, and then I started communicating with them. And as I mentioned, Bangladeshi government at this moment has to allow United Nations and NGO to do anything. And they are at this moment are not allowing. But we are communicating with the government to allow physicians. And we're telling them, I mean, these people are experts in their field and all that. I did not see any other medical mission whatsoever. But then, you know, there are a million people, you can see so much, you can walk so much. So I think it's urgently needed. I mean, you saw this. I mean, when I was going through camp to camp, I'm going through a sewerage literally. And children are doing everything there, including plays. And at one time, it was so muddy that, you know, I was up to my knees inside. So some other people have to pull me out of that. So it's a very bad situation for children to survive. And God forbid something happen. And the camps, the tents are bamboo and plastic, which is easier to get burned. And they're just next to each other. It's a disaster sitting it. And all of them inside have a wooden, you know, it was a jungle on the hill. They cut the jungle. They're keeping the wood which they're using to cook inside, which are in the center will be a person's height. On the sides, they're just as low as this. So if some spark goes, it's another disaster, and I don't think any fire brigade can reach there. Impossible to go on that. You need a helicopter to deal with that type of situation. So I think medical need is substantial. I mean, there are a lot of good things happening. For example, I'm not at the liberty of saying a whole lot of things which I know and are involved in, because my good Ken TV is recording and broadcasting. But there are people who have given up medical supplies until the end of December. They just gave it to refugees and using them. So they're completely out. I'm talking about certain government departments which were supposed to use for some other purpose, but they just gave it to refugees. So there are a lot of good-hearted Bangladeshi who's coming out of their way to help. So they need medicine, and they need a physician in very large number. And I think this is something we need to push for.
Also, I have one, the Syrian group, one of the groups, Syrian organization, this week they're going to help about medicine. Also, one of our board member, Emran, he's doctor, so he want to go help in Cox's Bazar. So this week, also Zakat Foundation, the process right now make one clinic of Technaf. So this is so important right now, sir.
My question is, are there any current members or parties within the Burmese government that are critical of government's policies toward the Rohingya or critical of the military actions toward the Rohingya currently within the government?
I haven't seen any criticism or any sort of concern from either anybody within the government, within the military, or within the Myanmar's diplomatic sector. They all seem to be on board with what's happening. And if you watch the UN Security Council debates, you will see that there's lots of obfuscation in terms of denial. And we've seen this before, that there's no ethnic cleansing, these people are burning their own homes. Aung San Suu Kyi gave a speech about 10 days ago to the international audience. She gave it in English because it was aimed at the international audience because she wasn't attending the General Assembly, in which she made a number of claims, such as, we don't know why the Rohingya are leaving, and we're trying to understand this, and this seemed quite strange to, I think, to a lot of people, because you could see the houses burning, you could see the villages burning from Bangladesh in terms of why the people were leaving. And she also said, interestingly, which touches upon the earlier point, that the Rohingya will all be able to return. Yeah, so she said in her speech to international audience that they will all be permitted to return. So the legislation in which she's referring to that the Rohingya can return was from 1993. I've had a look over that, and it stipulates conditions which are impossible to meet. So the Rohingya have to provide paperwork from which village they came from. They have to provide identification of themselves, which doesn't exist, they've never were issued. And then they have to provide paperwork of where they crossed the border in Bangladesh. So from the Bangladeshi side, they have to provide stamps on their passports or whatever the equivalent may be. And obviously, the people that are escaping genocide, literally with the clothes on their back, those conditions are impossible to meet. So much was articulated, and it's my understanding that most of the government was behind her, and her supporters were behind her as well when she made that speech and those conditions. So there's been almost no criticism at all within the Myanmar government and military.
One funny point there is there's a friend of mine, Mong Cerny, is a PhD from Wisconsin. He's a Burmese Buddhist who is probably one of the most prominent defender of Rohingya rights. He said the conditions which they are asking for Rohingyas to fulfill for citizenship, if it is applied to all Burmese, there will be no citizen left in Burma. Because, who has birth certificate of grandfather? And who has the documentation of their existence in that country at that year? His family is from the military. He said, our family cannot prove that we are citizens. So they are asking conditions for Rohingya to fulfill, which are absolutely impossible. Not going to happen.
It's kind of low. Never mind, I'll just bend over. You spoke earlier about the geopolitical arena in the area in Southeast Asia having possibly an influence on this. Would you believe that the increased military tensions between India and China, who recently had a military standoff in Bhutan, have anything to do with this? Just kind of distracting the area from this going on?
I think that further emphasizes the fact that there's much larger geopolitical machinations going on. India, China, Bhutan, these are powers that are competing for control over that particular region. And so when you insert the Rohingya into this, it's an insignificant entry, and it doesn't affect the kind of calculus. There's much larger calculations going on. Prime Minister Modi from India recently visited Myanmar, and after his trip, he decided to remove the 15,000 Rohingya in India itself. He said he wants to repatriate them elsewhere. Whether he was influenced directly by his visit to Myanmar or not, but he's essentially using the kind of same kind of language that these people have now become a security threat to our country, and hence they have to be expelled. So as I mentioned earlier, the Rohingya are amongst the most friendless people in the world as well. Nobody wants them in every country that they're in: Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Pakistan. They're right at the bottom of every social economic indicator, and that nobody essentially wants them. And even Bangladesh has passed a number of edicts, and Bangladesh should be celebrated for what it's done. But they've passed a number of edicts which try to really restrict the Rohingya. For example, Prime Minister Hasina has passed an edict saying that no Rohingya is permitted to get into a vehicle. So whether it's a taxi, bus, ambulance, they're not permitted to get into a physical vehicle because they simply don't want them to be blended into the population and disappearing. They want to keep them confined to a particular geographical region in the hope that some sort of deal can be made and then they can be sent back to Myanmar. How realistic that is a different question altogether, but they're right at the bottom of every calculation of any country in that region.
This policy is still in place. There are 4 army checkpoints, and people who somehow got to another city called Barishal, they were arrested and put in prison. All the people, citizens showed up with food and clothes and all of that, but of course they couldn't break the jail for them. So those policies are still in place that they must remain in that particular area.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, okay, Vanessa.
So, these countries, they're taking in the refugees, some of them Muslims. You mentioned Pakistan. Once they accept these people coming in, why would they deny them education later?
Some clarification there that Pakistan was taking them and giving them citizenship as well as full rights as a citizen. But that policy has changed recently under this whole war terrorism thing, because it is on the border of Afghanistan and there is a lot of stuff going on. So they are no longer allowed to be citizens. That's why they cannot enter schools. So they are free to have jobs and all that, but education is a government institution. They can still go on schools where they have to pay. So this is the difference. Saudi Arabia, they can have education, those who have gotten there. Malaysia, I have communicated with their prime minister. They're saying we have complex society. We have, Malays and Chinese and Hindus, and government schools are for them. And it will create a tension between those groups if we allow these people to get into the public school system. I don't buy their argument, but that's what they're saying. Of course, they can go to private schools, and there are rich Rohingyas in Malaysia whose children are going to private schools, but there are very few.
Okay, thanks. And please, everyone, give a round of applause to the panelists.